David and I are again so happy to be with you this afternoon, and we appreciate the hospitality of the church and the pastor's invitation for us to be allowed to speak the last several days and again this morning. David, I think on this Sabbath day at this church service, it's appropriate for us to have prayer. Would you mind having prayer for us?
Sure. Father in heaven, we thank you so much for the beautiful day that you've given to us, for waking us up this morning, to bringing us together here to worship you in your house. We pray especially that your Spirit would be with us during this service. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. We left off with the information coming to the fact that indeed God, of course, gave Moses the Ten Commandments, and they were put into the Ark of the Covenant there in the wilderness sanctuary. And now we're going to have the exciting venture of seeing where the commandments are in the universe. In the first covenant, had an earthly sanctuary, a tabernacle was set up, its first room with a lampstand, the table, the consecrated bread was called the holy place. Behind the second curtain was a room called the most holy place, which had the golden altar of incense and the gold-covered ark of the covenant. This ark contained Aaron's staff that had budded and the stone tablets of the covenant right there in the most holy place in all the earth. That place, we believe, is still on earth, hidden in a cave right there near Jerusalem. And sooner or later, I believe it's going to be brought out. But until that time, Christ ministers as the high priest at the right hand of God in the heavenly sanctuary. Tell us, David.
Now of the things which we have spoken, this is the sum. We have such an high priest who is set on the right hand of the throne of majesty in the heavens, a minister of the sanctuary, and of the true tabernacle, which the Lord pitched, and not man. Hebrews 1:8, 1 and 2.
In our imagination this morning, a lot of the times I try to imagine exactly what this passage is telling us this morning. And that is that indeed Jesus is there at the right hand of the majesty of heaven, in the throne room of the universe. And this is what we're going to be focusing on. Therefore, brothers, since we have confidence to enter the most holy place by the blood of Jesus, by a new and living way opened for us through the curtain, that is his body. That's what we're going to be concentrating on in the context of the search for the Ten Commandments in heaven. Where are they, and can they be identified? Can the place be identified? The Lord is in his holy temple. The Lord's throne is where? In heaven. The Lord has established his throne in the heavens, and his kingdom rules over all. He has established his throne in the heavens. Now, David and I believe that those heavens being referred to here are the heavens that we are aware of. The heavens that we can actually see. Not that we can actually see right now to the throne on the center of the universe, but that indeed this is where Christ is, and that's where he's ministering right now, this morning, looking down at us as well as everyone else throughout the world and throughout the universe as our high priest. Well, David, tell us about this Revelation 11:19. What does it mean? Give us some idea.
And the temple of God was opened in heaven, and there was seen in his temple the ark of his testament.
Now this chapter and this verse, we understand in studying the Bible, we understand that this opening here of the temple of God, and there was seen in the temple the ark of his testament, was a revelation then of the movement of Jesus Christ from his ministry there in the holy place to the ministry where? The Ark of the Covenant was where? In the earthly sanctuary, the most holy place. So we understand that this is indicating, of course, that the ark there being seen was in the most holy place, and this was signifying the time that indeed the door was opened, the temple of God was opened in heaven. That we believe was some 1844. So David, read this for us and give us some idea. Basically, this is the main focus of what we're going to be dealing with here.
Well, we're trying to establish that in the Bible we see proof that the original 10 Commandments are in the Ark of the Covenant right before God's throne, the great white throne. Creation commandment, the fourth commandment, the fourth of the 10 commandments, is still there as well, which says, "For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the seventh day and hallowed it." Exodus 20:11.
Let's sort of back up here a minute from this. Remember, the book of Hebrews also tells us that the 10 Commandments that were given to Moses were a copy of, as David has said, the original. There's the original in heaven, and the ones here in this world were simply a copy. So we're thinking today about Jesus being right there in the ark, in the most holy place, and there's simply an artist's conception of what it's all about. We have such a high priest who is set at the right hand of the throne of the majesty in the heavens, a minister of the true tabernacle, which is in heaven. He's there. There's the Ark of the Covenant. Then Christ himself is there before that ark, and there are the cherubim, just like they were here in this world. But it's an artist's pictorial view of what really is going on in heaven at this present moment as we speak this morning. But now, you know, David, when we meet people from time to time as we converse, one of the things that I almost invariably will ask someone if I haven't met them before, guess what it is? Where are you from? Where are you from? I want to know, where are you from? People ask me, even while here, where are you from? The pastor introduced me a little while ago saying, I was from, where? Tennessee. David's from Tennessee too. He's hiding in Loma Linda right now. But anyway, does God, just think about it, is it important at this particular point in the world's history that indeed God would allow us to know basically not exactly where, but at least somewhere near? In other words, we want to find out. I want to find out, if at all possible, everything that God has revealed. That's the way I look at things. If God has revealed it, I want to know it, because it's going to help me to understand the ministry of Jesus Christ and how close he wants me to be to him. So, in what direction might the center of the universe lie? Well, what is the center of the universe? Let me give you some insight. Years ago, there was a man by the name of W.A. Spicer. He was the president of the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists for many, many years. It was around 1900 or thereabouts, 1903 or 4. He was having a conversation with a man by the name of W.H. Kellogg. And Dr. Kellogg had been a Seventh-day Adventist for a long period of time, but Dr. Kellogg was coming out with some unusual theories, and W.A. Spicer, the president of the General Conference, was sitting there talking with Dr. Kellogg about these unusual theories, pantheism really, God was in everywhere. And Elder Spicer was saying, I can't really go along with this. And anyway, the subject turned to, guess what? The universe. And Kellogg was basically saying God was everywhere and everywhere. But Spicer came back and said, that indeed the universe, God is somewhere, and he's absolutely, I believe he's at the center of the universe. Elder Spicer said to Kellogg, I believe God, instead of just being anywhere and everywhere, that's pantheism, in the trees, in the dirt, on the mountains and everything, that God is at the center of the universe. But he said, I don't profess to know where the center of the universe is. But that's the first indication that I have found that a Seventh-day Adventist actually came across, a leader came across and saying he felt there was a center of the universe, and that's where God was. That's where his throne was. We didn't pick up on that. I didn't know that before we found the information we're going to bring to you this afternoon, but I think it's instructive for us to know that. That would be, of course, the direction to the great white throne. The center of the universe is where God is located, and has God left evidence of the existence of the center? And if so, which direction does it lie? So in order for us to understand this means that we've got to get into astronomy. We've got to get into this topic called cosmology. We've got to find out about this Big Bang, because if the Big Bang really happened, then of course there is no such thing as the center. Isn't that true, David? In the Big Bang, there is no center to the universe. But we're going to have to take some few minutes here now to decipher the Big Bang and show why it's wrong before we can find out what's right. So go ahead.
They may not admit that there's a center to the universe in the Big Bang model, but there is an admission that at one point, at a particular instant, roughly 15 billion years ago, all the matter and energy we can observe, concentrated in a region smaller than a dime, began to expand and cool at an incredibly rapid rate. And this is, of course, from a Scientific American article by Dr. Peebles in November 1994. He's essentially giving his explanation of a theory all of us know as the Big Bang model.
In other words, David, he was saying that all the matter in the universe, you, me, the mountains, the galaxies, all the galaxies, the sun, moon, stars, and everything, initially we just came out on a little tiny dot. You talk about faith. Talk about faith. Well, anyway, let's continue. There's a man by the name of Edward Harrison, and we want to try to help you understand that people who believe in this, what incredible things they to believe. Go ahead, David.
All right. The other night we talked about there were all these other fields of science, electromagnetism, optics, all of these fields of science that have verifiable assumptions. The laws that govern these sciences can be tested and they can be measured, but there is one branch of science, and that branch is cosmology, where we don't have that same ability to test the fundamental concepts which would validate that theory. And in fact, Edward Harrison in his book Cosmology brings this out very clearly when he says the following: science clings tenaciously to concepts of conservation, the most fundamental of which is the conservation of energy principle. The conservation of energy principle serves us well in all sciences except cosmology. To the question where the energy goes in an expanding universe and where it comes from in a collapsing universe, the answer is nowhere. Because in this one case, energy is not conserved.
David, very, very quickly, I remember getting a telephone call from you years ago when you were at Southern Adventist University. Got a call in the middle of the night, and you said, Dad, I'm out on a date, but guess what? I ran out of gas. I said, well, no problem. You're in the Big Bang. You believe in the Big Bang. All you got to do is just crank it up again and go on. That's non-conservation of energy. That's David really found out for sure you can't deny conservation of energy. You got to put gas in that tank. In any event, where does the lost energy go? Peoples now is saying the resolution of this apparent paradox is that while energy conservation is a good local concept, there's not a general global energy conservation law in general relativity theory. General relativity theory is what supposedly governs the Big Bang. So basically this man Peebles, a scientist, is saying, well, we want to keep conservation of energy local. In other words, we all got to put gasoline in our tanks. But as far as the universe is concerned, no, it really doesn't matter that much at all. Here we have a huge contradiction in the Big Bang theory with the operation of the universe, and this is in itself sufficient to conclude there must be a major flaw in the theory somewhere. Where is it? Well, go ahead, David, tell us about what James Truffle has said about the galaxies.
In his book, The Dark Side of the Universe, he makes the following statement: the problem of explaining the existence of galaxies has proved to be one of the thorniest in cosmology. By all rights, they just shouldn't be there. Yet there they sit. It's hard to convey the depth of frustration that this simple fact induces among scientists. Time after time, new developments have come along, and it has seemed that the problem was solved. Each time the solution turned soft, new problems developed, and we were right back where we started. See, if you have a model of the Big Bang, where you have the entire matter of the universe concentrated in a region smaller than a dime, expanding and cooling at a rapid rate 15 billion years ago, how do you go from that explosion to an orderly universe where you see the different types of galaxies that we see, and the clumping, the clusters of galaxies, the superclusters of galaxies? All of these things don't make any sense in light of an initial uncontrolled, violent explosion, violent expansion of the universe. And here you have the cosmologists themselves admitting to the fact that the existence of galaxies is one of the thorniest problems in cosmology. Maybe it's like one of the problems that geology has in how is this granite formed, the origin of granite, which we talked about yesterday. Now, I think that if you really want to look into these models of the universe, you will see that there are problems after problems everywhere you look. And it's no accident that they have these problems, because when God created the universe, He created it in such a way so that when scientists looked at the universe, when they looked at the stars, when they looked at the order in which the stars were arranged, and especially now with the advent of the Hubble telescope, they can see the vastness of the universe and just how little their scientific theories can contain really what's out there.
Amen. Well, let's go quickly here. Hubble Space Telescope has opened our eyes to the universe. And now, what's there? We just got through reading that James Trevor said the galaxy shouldn't even be there. Look at this, the NGC 7009. Hubble finds an hourglass nebula around a dying star. In other words, something exploded and produced those rings. David, go ahead. Tell us about the pillars of creation.
Exactly that. The astronomers focused the telescope on this image, and they thought of what they could call it, and they just called it pillars of creation. Now, it's interesting that secular science would actually choose religious terms in naming these celestial objects, pillars of creation. Creation, by all, not pillars of singularity, because in scientific terms, we talk about a miracle or creation in terms of singularity, but they didn't call it pillars of singularities or pillars of multiple singularities. It was pillars of creation.
We're going to go through these photographs pretty rapidly because we've got a lot to cover here. And by the way, after it's all over here in about a month or thereabouts, we'll have hopefully the DVDs from our presentations, and we'll put them on. We'll advertise how you can buy them personally if you go to our halos.com website, or we'll try to put them on our halos.com website, so you won't have to buy anything. We just want to let you know that all this is going to be available. A glowing pool of light. What we're illustrating here basically is God has, remember the Bible says, the heavens declare the glory of God and the firmament showeth his handiwork. We're seeing the glories of God as revealed through the Hubble Space Telescope. And we're just going to go through very quickly. David, you just want to give us the titles of these and whatever you would like to say quickly.
There's hardly anything you can add to these pictures. Spirograph Nebula.
All right.
Another Hubble photographed object here.
We're not trying to say we understand. The astronomers don't understand what they're seeing in many cases. They're just giving them names. What is this? I mean, what you see in astronomy, the world of astronomy, the distant reaches of the universe, are unbelievable. But the astronomers are simply saying, we give it a name here, we give it a name there, and that presumes to make it appear as if they're explaining. No. Helix Nebula, look at this, the exploding star and the colors and everything. The unfallen worlds, the people in the universe, are having the opportunity of looking at this for a long period of time, and now we see it through Hubble. The galaxy, the warped galaxy, as the camera passes a milestone. That was the Hubble Space Telescope. The nebulosity there in the center are millions and billions of stars. The disk structure there, above and below, are again vast number of stars, but they're just simply unresolved in this particular photograph. The Southern Crab Nebula, again, something exploded in those rings. Guess what this one is called? Use your imagination for the Arctic. What does it look like? The Arctic. Who lives in the Arctic? Go ahead, David.
Well, we don't use those terms anymore.
Okay.
But I think they call this the Eskimo Nebula or something like that.
They call this the Eskimo Nebula. It's out there in the universe.
But the people that live up there don't like to be called Eskimos. I've heard that. I'm not sure if that's true.
Anyway, here we have more miracles of revelations, so to speak, there in the universe itself, the Cartwheel Galaxy, a bullseye collision supposedly is occurring, the glowing eye nebula there in NGC 6751, something explodes, but look at the beauty and the detail of what is there in the heavens being caught by Hubble. Guess what this one is? David knows. What is it, David?
This is the Ant Nebula.
You know something? It occurs to me that the God of heaven has a sense of humor, knowing that we're going to be standing here looking at that and saying that indeed, Ant Nebula in the universe?
Well, the scientists are the ones that name these. I mean, you have these guys with all this education, and they look at that and they're like, Ant Nebula.
Can you imagine
that's how
that?
these things are done.
Can you imagine the Big Bang people simply wondering, Ant Nebula in the Big Bang, how about that? Hubble's
They could have used like some kind of fancy biological, name for it, but that would have not been as good as Ant Nebula. They could have used like the formal biological name for it.
Oh, formal, okay. The Ant Nebula, very simple for all of us here. Anyway, Hubble deep field view. Hubble took a picture of the vast reaches of the universe by focusing a long time, many orbits around the sun and the earth and so forth, and brought out this great picture there of the Hubble Deep Field.
Yeah, just about that deep view thing. I think some of you might have seen or heard that when the Hubble did that deep view, they actually just took a tiny little speck of the sky about the size of your finger, held about, just a little bit away from you. And if you project that against the space that it blocks behind that, you can just get all of this information. In fact, some of you might have visited Griffith Observatory since they've remodeled it. And actually, I've been there a couple of times, but I only really recently found out that there's an underground part to it. I know, I was slow in catching on to that. But once I found that out, I went down below the main lobby level in the Griffith Planetarium, and I went down below. And you can actually see a wall covered with a photograph of the universe. And in the movie that describes what that photograph is all about, it says that the Hubble Space Telescope took a photograph of this, and it was just a wall mural full of galaxies and things from the deep space that the Hubble telescope photographed. And it was essentially just the projection of what your finger would block out of a tiny strip of sky in one direction. And there's just literally thousands of galaxies just in that one little tiny area. So Hubble Deep Field is a similar idea, it just takes one tiny little speck of the sky, and you can see what's behind it.
We're going to see a little bit more of this in just a minute. Hubble Deep Field was amazing. Again, fading supernova, exploded at one time. Hubble's vast panoramic portrait of the vast star-forming region. Star clusters born in the wreckage of cosmic collisions of different galaxies. Well, we don't think there are any cosmic collisions going on. First of all, in the Big Bang Theory, you should never have any galaxies close at all. Everything is supposed to be expanding away from everything else for billions and billions of years, and here we have some galaxies close at hand. Guess what? The astronomers don't say anything about it. And the supersonic exhaust, who's got a high-speed motorcycle or whatever. Anyway, the supersonic exhaust from a certain nebula. Can you believe this? A star, instead of exploding spherically and so forth, is setting out jets. Unusual. The Cat's Eye Nebula. Cat's Eye. And again, something equivalent to that in a different range of light accumulation. And again, one of the disk galaxies, again, the central region there, the ellipse itself being spread out, and then the luminosity above and below, that greenish hue there you see is really vast billions of stars, which cannot be resolved, of course, at the resolution the picture was taken. This is Monocerotis. It's a star that's been exploding here for the last several years, and you can see the beautiful gas clouds, of course, extending from the center. Pillars of Creation again, another spiral galaxy similar to the one of our own, of course. Here again, Hubble Deep Field, vast millions and billions of galaxies. We're only seeing several thousand of them here through the Hubble Space Telescope. And here we have
Edwin Hubble
himself. David, tell us now very quickly, our time is running away from us here. What is this all about?
It's interesting. This is the results of Hubble's experimental data. He actually found that the distance of a galaxy from the Earth had a relationship to its redshift. And guess where he found all this out? It wasn't very far from here, actually, just in the hills or the mountains north of Los Angeles here. There he is, sitting at his desk, but there in the background you can see him looking through the eyepiece, there with his pipe. He's doing two things at once. He's smoking and he's looking through the telescope. That telescope, you can see, if you go just to the mountains here north of Los Angeles, you can see the 100-inch telescope at Mount Wilson. And it's kind of an interesting tour that they have there. You can go up to see the telescope itself. They have a little audio clip that you can push a button and listen to it, and has some interesting things on the history of Hubble's work there. But basically, his work was very instrumental in determining what they call the Hubble relation. The Hubble relation was used in the formation and the structuring of the Big Bang model of the universe, which says that we live in an expanding universe.
In other words, the greater the distance of the galaxy, the greater the shift of the light coming from the galaxy to the red end of the spectrum. All right? And here is Hubble Deep Field again, and those green circles around those dots there. If you could look at it closely enough, you would see that within those green circles are little red dots. In other words, the redshift of the galaxies are so far away from us that the redshift has changed the color of the light received from the galaxies, from the visible region, the light, so to speak, white or thereabouts, yellow, on to the orange into the red. Proof that indeed Hubble's original redshift relation does work even now with the Hubble Space Telescope. Very quickly, we're going to say most of us are familiar with the Doppler effect. If you're speeding down the highway and the policeman is back of you, he shoots the radar gun, it goes and it comes back, and the wavelength then will be increased. The wavelength of the radiation will be increased. That is a red shift. Our car, the car you're in, is receding from the policeman over here. That's called a red shift of the light. It gets longer and longer in wavelength. Indeed, if you're approaching and the policeman is seeing you coming, then of course that shortens the wavelength, and it's called a blue shift. So now Hubble then, the only thing the astronomers knew how to interpret his data of the red shift at the time he lived was indeed what? The Doppler effect. And David, just very briefly tell us, if you apply the Doppler effect now to his original data, what do we find?
Well, we find that not only did Hubble find then that the distance from the galaxy to the Earth was related to the redshift, but he also then concluded that that redshift meant something, and that what it meant was that the galaxy was moving, and moving at a very rapid rate. So the belief then that we live in an expanding universe stemmed from Hubble's data.
Now, it's interesting, you see, we've got down there the Earth, that's where he was making his observations, and it says this result presented astronomers with a huge dilemma. Presented astronomers with a huge dilemma because they were accustomed to interpreting the redshifts according to the Doppler principle, which is what we just got through saying. That indeed, it appeared, if you applied the Doppler principle, which is the only thing astronomers knew, then it appears as if all the galaxies are what? Moving away from our point of observation. But if you do that, this is a schematic, then you're at the center, and what Hubble was basically seeing is that all the galaxies of the universe, and as you can see, those arrows, of course, are getting redder and redder and redder the farther out they are. Those arrows represent vectors, velocity vectors. So as the galaxies are moving away from us in every direction, the red shifts are getting greater and greater and greater with greater distance. Now. The universe then is expanding away from us for sure. We're going to see that Hubble didn't like that. David, tell us about Isaiah 40:22.
Turns out that you can actually look at some of the Bible text and see that the Bible even hints to the fact that God is stretching out the heavens. In Isaiah 40, verse 22, it is he that sitteth upon the circle of the earth, and the inhabitants thereof are as grasshoppers, that stretcheth out the heavens as a curtain, and spreadeth them out as a tent to dwell in. Psalm 115:3, but our God is in the heavens, he hath done whatsoever he pleased. Psalm 103:19, the Lord hath prepared his throne in the heavens, and his kingdom ruleth over all.
Now, remember, a few minutes ago we stated that Psalm 103:19 about God preparing his throne in the heavens and his kingdom rules over all. The question we're getting to, the issue we're getting to here is that we believe, according to these passages, it says in Psalm 115 there, God is in the heavens, he hath done whatsoever he pleased, the Lord has prepared his throne in the heavens. He wants us to know, as far as possible, where it is. And that's what this is all about right now. Where is the throne of God? Can we know any? We want to know all we can know from the Bible and from science, is what we're basically saying here. Again now, for thus saith the Lord that created the heavens, God himself that formed the earth and made it, he hath established it, the heavens, and created it, not in vain. He formed it to be inhabited. I am the Lord, there is none else. So he called the heavens into existence. The heavens are not the result of a long cosmic evolutionary period of time. Now, we'll have to say a little bit more about how the light comes to us from the vast reaches of the universe, but we want to finish these statements first. David?
Thus saith the Lord, He that created the heaven stretched them out, Isaiah 42:5. Isaiah 45:12 says, I have made the earth and created man upon it. I, even my hands, have stretched out the heavens, and all their host have I commanded.
See, what we're saying here, this last passage, Isaiah 45:12, God is connecting the fact that he made the earth, created man, my hands have stretched out the heavens, as if, you folks down here on planet Earth, if you'll pay attention to what I say here in the Bible, you're going to find out some very interesting things about the universe and about me. Now, these are very clear passages here. Anyone with a concordance can pick it up, and look and see these passages. And does anyone have you ever heard before tonight or the last few days or whatever, of anyone telling you there's a center to the universe? Probably not, because the worldwide scientific community believes what, David?
That there is no center.
There is no center. Big Bang Theory, we're going to see, is based on the assumption there is no center. Why in the world is that? Stephen Hawking, one of the world's most famous scientists, wrote this in one of his books. David?
He says in his book, now at first sight, all this evidence the universe looks the same. Whichever direction we look in might seem to suggest there is something special about our place in the universe. In particular, it might seem that if we observe all other galaxies to be moving away from us, then we must be at the center of the universe. There is, however, an alternate explanation. The universe might look the same whichever direction as seen from any other galaxy too. This, as we have seen, was Friedman's second assumption. We have no scientific evidence for or against this assumption. We believe it only on the grounds of modesty. So the point is that we're here today trying to say that we believe that there is order to the universe.
Amen.
That God's throne is established in the heavens. And we'll even propose that God's throne is at the center of the universe. Now, if you take that with the scientific evidence which we have seen, you can actually come to the conclusion that you can take Hubble's data, the data that shows the redshift relation, that shows Earth being at the center of some type of an expansion, and put two and two together and say, you know what? We really only believe on the grounds of modesty that there is no center to the universe, not on the basis of anything that's scientific, but it's just on the basis of modesty.
It's important, isn't it, David, that indeed Hawking, one of the world's renowned scientists, would come to the place of looking at this data that Hubble had way back in 1929, and here is an admission that indeed it could be. But we believe, the scientists believe, we think there's another assumption. That other assumption we're going to see is what Hubble decided. We've got several passages here, quotes from Hubble himself. We'll have to just summarize basically what Hubble was saying here in his book. He's got a book, and we've read the book. Anyway, this quotation and the next quotation, basically Hubble is saying in his own book that indeed there's a problem. The last sentence there simply says, such a condition would imply we occupy a unique position in the universe, analogous, in a sense, to the ancient conception of a central Earth. In other words, Hubble is saying, I recognize the possibility that indeed we're in a unique position. But he says this hypothesis cannot be disproved. In other words, you can't disprove the idea of the center of the universe from his own data, but it is unwelcome, would be accepted only as a last resort in order to say the phenomena. Therefore, we disregard this possibility, disregard the idea of the center. Consider the alternative, namely, a distribution which thins out with distance. Then, this no center, go ahead, David, let's take a minute here.
To this principle has been added another proposition that all observers, regardless of their location, will see the same general picture of the universe. The second principle is a sheer assumption. Nevertheless, it leads to a rather remarkable consequence, for it demands that if we see the nebula all receding from our position in space, then every other observer, no matter where he may be located, will see the nebula all receding from his position. In other words, they're just saying that, instead of thinking that we're at the center, we're just going to adopt the assumption that no matter where you are in the universe, if you were there, you would see the exact same thing we're seeing, which means that there is a universal expansion of the universe without any center anywhere. So that's the assumption, because they want to get away from the idea of the ancient conception of a central Earth. Remember how embarrassed people that believed in Ptolemy's model of the universe were? Ptolemy said the Earth is at the center of the universe. The sun rotates around the Earth. The planets rotate around the Earth. Well, isn't it interesting that Copernicus comes along later and he says, hey, the evidence really better fits the sun being at the center of the solar system and the planets rotating around the sun. Then once everybody kind of looked into it, they're like, oh yeah, you're right, that does seem better. But it wasn't without a struggle that they came to that conclusion. Now what are we going to do? Go back to an Earth-centered universe after all? Was Ptolemy actually right? Partly right? Well, it's interesting, The sun is, we're not here to say that the Earth is the center of the solar system. Don't mistake us.
No. What we are saying is that there was evidence that Hubble saw that indeed indicated a center, but he didn't want it. This is what else he says. There must be no favored location in the universe, no center. Now, this is a world-renowned scientist, one of the greatest astronomers ever lived, and yet he's making a declaration. There must be. In other words, he sees this data, and he sees how it could be interpreted, but he says there must be no center, no boundary. All must see the universe alike. That's the foundation of atheism, evolution, Big Bang theory, that we are not special in a place here in the universe, in the galaxy, but indeed we're just part of, of a vast, random chaos and so forth. That's what they want us to believe. In order to ensure the situation, the cosmologist, postulates, that means assumes, spatial isotropy and spatial homogeneity, which is his way of stating that the universe must be pretty much alike everywhere in all directions. Over the last 12, 15 years, over and over again, I, with David, have tried to publish papers over and over again to show the scientific evidence that indeed there is this nearby center. We succeeded one time. And since that time, the astronomers have gotten together and they said, no. They don't want it to be known that indeed their whole theory of the Big Bang is falls flat on its face, because the astronomical evidence does show there is a nearby center. This is what we're going to do here the next number of minutes, David, is to escalate our presentation.
We need to go a little faster, don't we? Or we'll just cut it short. I will say, if you go up to Mount Wilson, you can see that there's another person visited up there one time. Albert Einstein was very interested in Hubble's work, by the way. And he actually went to Mount Wilson to see for himself where that data had been collected on the Hubble relation. So there's a little walkway up there going to the telescope, and you see a little photograph of Einstein standing there with Hubble during his visit up there.
So anyway, basically, Hubble disregarded the evidence for a center of the universe and decided on something quite different, and that is, these little boxes here indicate basically what they believe. There's a certain space is expanding. Space itself is supposedly expanding. If you have something the size of a book 1,000 years ago or so forth, 10,000 years ago, today it would supposedly involve a volume of a greater size. And a box today would tomorrow be a little bit larger in terms of the space. And so these boxes here simply indicate volumes of space, and those little circles and so forth in there are the galaxies. And so what they were basically saying is space itself is expanding, and so therefore as space itself expands, the galaxies within the space expand, and so therefore the galaxies move apart, and so therefore no matter where you are in the universe, you're still going to see the same relation. Big time speculation. Why do we know it isn't true? Why do we know it's false? Is because, you see, this is saying that indeed the theory of evolution, the theory of the cosmic expansion says we're going to move the galaxies apart, but we're not going to change the size of the galaxies themselves. That doesn't make any sense. That's just something they postulate and assume. The very fact of the matter is there's a huge flaw, and that is if the galaxies are moving apart from this thing called cosmic expansion, guess what's going to happen? The galaxies themselves blow apart into smithereens. There would be no galaxies whatsoever. And this is what the astronomers do not want you to know.
Basically, the astronomers are saying that the space-time force that's actually stretching the space itself between the galaxies it's not creating an additional distance, although it is. It's actually expanding space itself, space-time itself. It is too weak of a force to overcome the gravitational attraction of the galaxies. But unfortunately, if you look at the fundamental theory behind what space-time expansion is actually based upon, then they can't get around the fact that it's going to be operative not only outside of the galaxies, but also within the galaxies as well.
So we continue. Science violates conservation of energy. We've already talked about this. Indeed, it does. It's this redshift expansion that violates the conservation of energy. And when the sum of all the expansion photons in the universe, light comes to us through photons, light is throughout the universe. If you calculate the total energy involved in the expansion with respect to the conservation of energy, non-conservation of energy, David and I have done that, and it's 30 million times the mass of all the visible stars in the universe. Fantastic non-conservation of energy.
And yeah, basically the reason why they're saying that there's non-conservation of energy is because in the space-time expansion, you have the space itself expanding. In the process of a space expanding, you have the photon wavelength expanding, which means that the wavelength is getting larger, right? And if you have a wavelength getting larger and you have the energy of the photons equal to hc over lambda, if you increase the denominator, what happens to energy? It goes down, right? So that's why they're saying that there's non-conservation of energy in space-time expansion, because of that. The energy equation equals hc over lambda. You increase lambda, you decrease the energy. So it's not hard to understand why that they're saying that. What's hard to understand is that they still believe it in spite of the fact that it is non-conservation of energy.
What we're seeing here very briefly is COBE, Cosmic Orbiting Background Explorer. It was sent into orbit for measuring what is called the cosmic black-body radiation. Don't have time to go into all details this afternoon, but it's something that pervades the universe. Where does it all come from? Supposedly in the Big Bang Theory, it came from the Big Bang, cooling down and so forth over billions and billions of years. And this is what it says, though. We don't have time to read the whole thing, but it says a scientist, Weishaupt, said the following, that indeed this cosmic black-body radiation, really, really unusual, because it does what? It establishes an absolute reference frame for the universe. Isn't that logical from the standpoint of what we've already said in the Bible? God has established what? His throne in the heavens. His throne is fixed. So therefore it stands to reason there is going to be then what? A cosmic reference frame, an absolute reference frame, and there is. It was found by this. Nature has provided an absolute frame of reference. The deeper significance of this concept is not yet clear. Now, we've got a new model of the universe. Again, we won't have time to go into all the details about it, but I've been trying to publish with David over the last 10, 15 years the details of this new model of the universe that would account for what we're talking about this afternoon in a scientific way. Back in the late 1990s, there was a science magazine. What did it have? It said basically exploding stars point to a universal repulsive force. Again, we'll just have to run over this very, very briefly. There is a repulsive force in the universe that was discovered now in 1988. That's when that science magazine was published. And again, there was another one. Astronomers see a cosmic anti-gravity force at work. What does this all mean? Well, these reports in the early 1998 basically said we've got supernova going off throughout the universe, and it's telling us there's a vast repulsive force greater than anything we ever thought about. A greater repulsive force, an anti-gravity force. What does that all mean? Well, the very fact of the matter is, just before those articles came out, we published a paper in this Modern Physics Letters A showing that indeed this new model of the universe we're talking about can be developed on the basis of what? An expanding anti-gravity force, a repulsive force called the cosmological constant. Well, here's a brief schematic then of what we're saying, that indeed there is a center. This is the great white throne. The galaxies are moving away from it. There's a new cosmic model that will explain it. Here we are. You can see indeed there's a center of the universe nearby, and indeed the redshift is increasing. The galaxies are getting smaller, and they're getting redder and redder as they go out and with increasing distance. And then it says, if you look at the type right over there, it says this outer galactic shell, which is beyond now the visible universe, is where there is a pre-Genesis series of galaxies. We're going to deal more with this afternoon, so we're just hitting the high spots, so to speak, right now. This is a schematic then of what our universe really looks like. There's this outer shell of galaxies, the one that held the inhabitants of the other worlds, the ones that was in existence for a vast eons of time before our universe came into existence. But our Milky Way galaxy there is at the center of our own visible universe. Several years ago, we had a very good friend, John Isley, who was an astronomer at the United States Naval Research Lab, who put a lot of thought in the question of the location of God's throne in the center of the universe. We'll run through this as quickly as we possibly can. John is saying in his booklet, dominating the vista high above the southern horizon is Orion, the mighty hunter. On the whole, he goes on to say in his booklet just how wonderful the constellation of Orion is. And I have to say this, that indeed, the last sentence there, he believes, he says, in my opinion, God is deliberately attracting our attention to the direction of Orion and the great Orion Nebula, that wonderful place that has fascinated astronomers for hundreds of years. And then David, there at the last sentence, what does it say?
He says, I believe it to be a unique and important training ground for spiritual as well as physical truth.
Therefore, John is saying in this next paragraph that he feels that something unusual is going to be happening in Orion here in the days ahead. That was published in the late 1980s. In the 1993 issue, John is saying here, it's therefore not unreasonable to believe the obvious when it happens, that something unusual is going to be seen in the heavens, and here it happened. Hand of God, Nature magazine, 1993, they published on the front page of Nature magazine this hand of God like that. You can see it up there.
Well, it's these jets of gas, and the astronomers decided to name this. You know, they look at the jets of gas, it looks like some fingers, and they're like, oh, hand of God.
Yes, as you have pointed out.
These guys are very intuitive when it comes to naming these things. And of course, in Orion, calling it the hand of God has significance for a lot of us.
Yeah. And the upper right was a small photograph of that hand, but of course the larger one is on the left. As David has said, the people who did this, who saw it, and they waited about 6 months before they published it because they wanted to get a name for it. And as you say, of course, they chose. These were not God's people. These were not Christians who did this. So John is ending up in his book, The Marvels and Mysteries of Orion, saying, the present time, the scientific community is conducting the most intensive study of Orion. And indeed, it has continued to do that. And he says in the last sentence, I strongly believe the Holy Spirit is actually leading out in what's going on there in Orion. Well, David and I have a great reason to believe that. John believed, this Early Writings is a book written by a Seventh-day Adventist lady. We'll be talking more about it this afternoon. David, tell us what it says very briefly here.
Well, as far as we know, the Anglo-Australian astronomers did not have access to this quote when they named that structure. But anyway, for us, we can see the quote, dark, heavy clouds on page 41 of Early Writings. By the way, this is the only place in the writings of Ellen White that actually mentions Orion in this way, one time. So a lot of people, say, well, just one time, what are you going to do with it? But anyway, here it is. Dark, heavy clouds came up and clashed against each other. The atmosphere parted and rolled back. Then we could look up through the open space in Orion, whence came the voice of God. And then she makes a very incredible statement. The holy city will come down through that open space. Now, that's a prediction that you can sort of wait to verify, right? Of course, by the time you end up verifying whether that's true or not, it's too late to change your mind and believe in it.
For many decades, some of the Adventists have had a special interest in looking at Orion and finding out where in the world is any special open space in Orion. David and I gave this talk in Washington, D.C., a version of this back in 2006. And just before we did that, I was looking on the website of NASA, Hubble Space Telescope, and what do you know? NASA had turned Hubble Space Telescope toward Orion, and they started to focus. But basically what it's saying here is they had found the open space in Orion. And here's a low contrast picture, but now we're going to go through the Orion Nebula. Look, as we zoom in on that center region there of the trapezium. In other words, we've gone from a low definition shot, now we're zooming in, and right in the center are the 4 stars of the trapezium. Isn't that true, David? And so look on the left over there, if you would. It's sort of like that is the top covering, and something else is being pulled back. And as we continue to go into, it seems like, we're looking into a bowl, an opening, so to speak. And as we go further and further and further, the trapezium stars become greater and greater in definition until we finally get something, there they are. We are truly zooming into a deep recess or a deep hole there in the Orion Nebula. And so there it is. It does have, Orion Nebula does have an open space, which David and I associate, of course, with what we just read.
Now, we're not saying that that was heaven, by the way.
No.
Don't go away thinking that.
No, that's right. In our DVD, which you can purchase tonight if you're interested, or just go on the website and read it and listen to it and view it, we have a video, Center of the Universe, which goes into great detail about what we're talking about right here. And it ends up with basically animation of a trip from Earth going through where?
Orion?
He knows. It goes through the Orion Nebula, and it's beautiful, absolutely fascinating to see the trip, the cosmic trip from Earth going through the Orion Nebula and then going directly to the throne of God. And here we have, guess what? The throne. There we have Christ, of course, right before the throne, the angel, recording angel, and so forth. And there they pulled out, of course, the Ten Commandments to the outside of the Ark of the Covenant. And the one that is highlighted there is, for the sake of what we're doing this afternoon, it's the fourth commandment. It's the fourth commandment. In other words, we're going to the actual throne room of God, and there is the throne, that is the actual throne, and there is the Ten Commandments. One of them, of course, have been pulled out, and there's the view of it. So this Hubble redshift relation, basically, we say, has pointed out that indeed there is a center of the universe. We're very close by to the center. In our own galaxy, we're that close for the center to actually be in our own galaxy. The Orion Nebula is within our own galaxy, and our Center of the Universe DVD, as I said, has this animation of going from Earth through the Orion Nebula and then on to the throne of God, and to see, of course, what you've just seen. Here is another visual of it. Again, the ancient heavens, the ones that detected only by the cosmic microwave telescopes, vast number of galaxies outside. But the region inside there is the region of the visible universe that was created in the 6 days of creation. Now, we want to end. There it is, a visual. Again, the God's throne in the center, the outer galactic shell, the Milky Way boundary.
That's not a Hubble shot, by the way.
That we need it. We need to know that. Now,
Wouldn't that be interesting if it was?
Very quickly, I know someone is going to ask, many people will be asking the question, David and I are up here, we must have lost it because don't we know that the galaxies are what, billions and billions, 10 billion light years away and so forth? So how in the world could it possibly be that light is ever coming from the distant galaxies to us, in 6,000 years or anything? Should take 10 billion years to get here. But remember this very clearly. Remember this. Jesus in the New Testament was saying, he was praying there on the Mount of Transfiguration, and what happens? Well, basically, light, it says, comes from the throne of God directly to Christ in what? Instant of time. And also, we believe that indeed there are these other worlds scattered throughout the many billions of galaxies throughout the universe, and that they have a what? Present understanding, view, so to speak, of what's going on at the present time. We'll tell you more about this afternoon, why we believe that indeed the vast reaches of the universe, wherever they are, they're having a TV picture, so to speak, of all that we're doing. Some of them are tuning into what we're saying today even, so that indeed transmission of light per se is not the issue. It's the way in which God operates the universe. When Jesus was here and he wanted to speak to the Father, the light came from the throne of God in an instant of time, so that God has some way of communicating information from the vast reaches of the universe to us over a short period of time. The Bible clearly tells us, that the angels of heaven fly throughout the universe over very, very short periods of time. And whatever that mechanism is, there's another dimension that we don't understand. We can't see the angels. There's another dimension that we do not have access to, and it's in this other dimension that the light is transmitted, the information is transmitted to us at the present time over a very, very short period of time. So indeed, when God created the heavens and the earth, fourth commandment, it was with the purpose that God had in mind that Adam and Eve, even in that particular time in creation week, could see the beauties of the universe, even as today, as we've been able to see them through the beauties of the Hubble Space Telescope. And so, David, how do we end? What do we expect to come as a result of this?
Well, we end with the second coming of Jesus.
The Center of the Universe DVD ends with not only the trip to the great white throne and the judgment, but again it returns. There's a return from the great white throne back through the Orion Nebula, and indeed that is the time of the second coming of Christ, and that is the last picture in the Center of the Universe DVD. We surely have had the wonderful opportunity of having this presentation with you today. We apologize for going over somewhat, but thank you so much for this opportunity.